Hi there, everybody. Happy Friday. It's 4 o'clock in New York. Well, here we go again. If you hear that screeching sound, it's just the sound of the whole of the American economy once again swerving wildly across the interstate at 100 miles an hour. Behind the wheel, one guy, then one guy only. Donald Trump reignited our country's trade war today, making not one but two major and consequential announcements that stand to impact just about all of us, whether we like it or not. The first, a threat that target the EU. On social media, Donald Trump recommended, to whom no one seems to know, sweeping 50% tariffs on the European Union. They're to start on June 1st because, in his words, trade talks are, quote, going nowhere. It is a shock to the system, given something NBC News has reported early on. Quote, the EU bloc is America's second biggest trading partner behind China. The U.S. exported more than $350 billion of goods to the 27-nation bloc in recent years and imported $550 billion worth of goods. This morning, Republican Congressman French Hill, the leader of the House Financial Services Committee, was asked about this new tariff.
In the language this morning, the president said that he was going to recommend a 50% tariff starting on June 1st. Who's he recommending that to? The Senate? Like, I mean, if it's not an emergency, if it's not a fentanyl situation, does he have the authority?
Recommending it to himself.
Yeah, I think his pitch is, you're not at the table. We need you at the table.
We're at the he's recommending it to himself part of the Trump tariff story. Now, whether or not Trump has authority in this matter at all, the fact remains, as experts have repeated on this program and others over and over again, the cost of tariffs is eventually paid for and shouldered by the American consumers. It is a tax, which leads us to the second of Trump's big announcements today, again made on social media. He threatened Apple with a 25% tariff unless Apple starts producing iPhones in the U.S. In the course of making that threat, Trump suggested the tariff would, quote, be paid by Apple. A strange thing to say from the man who's long maintained that tariffs are paid for by other countries. But again, neither's true. It's the consumer that pays. Targeting Apple in this manner would bump the price of an iPhone up to about $3,500. And consumers who might have considered another brand of phone should know. Just this afternoon, Trump suggested Samsung and other mobile companies could face a similar 25% tariff. That is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. With me at the table, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans. Also joining us, professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan, Justin Wolfers is back. Also joining us, former Republican Congressman David Jolly, who recently registered as a Democrat and is right now considering a run for governor of Florida. Let me start with you, Christine. What is the American consumer to make of these two announcements?
I mean, these are, again, shifting timelines and shifting tariff levels. And I mean, it's really hard to understand how much consumers eventually would have to pay for these things, because, again, is it the president negotiating? Is it the president trying to cajole Tim Cook into having more manufacturing in the United States? What is exactly the end game with the European Union? I mean, when I look at the things that the U.S. imports from the European Union, it's obviously like olive oil and Parmesan cheese, but it's also car parts and drugs and medicines and medical devices and things that a 50% tariff would be really, really disruptive to those supply chains. So where we go from here, who knows? But one thing that I think is very interesting, Nicolle, is that on Liberation Day, so-called Liberation Day on April 2nd, the president had a 39% tariff on the EU, which everyone said, wait, that seems way too high. He paused it. And now, before that 90-day pause is over, there's a new deadline, a June deadline, and a new tariff rate of 50%. That's one of the reasons why markets are so unsettled. They don't see the strategy and they don't understand the follow-through.
Well, are they looking for a strategy, or have the markets recognized yet that with Donald Trump there isn't one?
I think markets are just concerned that businesses don't have any certainty. If you're a business who imports any of those things I just mentioned for the EU, what in the world are you doing as you're making your orders right now, trying to decide what you're bringing in and at what price point and what you're going to use it in your business for, or what you're going to sell it for. It's just, there's no clarity for these businesses still. We had been in a period of de-escalation, and you saw markets come back from where they had been in April with all that chaos. Markets slowly came back and recovered all of those losses. And now we've shifted, it feels like today, in one day, from de-escalation to then brand new threats with new timelines and new tariff levels. And so that's just injected all this uncertainty back into everything.
Do markets think that there's anyone checking Trump in the same way they did during 1.0 when they saw people like Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin around Trump, and they felt at least somewhat reassured that before he blew up our second largest trading partner relationship, that someone could stop him? Do they view this cabinet differently?
There had been a feeling among a lot of market participants and economists and business leaders that Scott Bessent was the shock absorber on the car. You had that great metaphor in your open of, this car, driving 100 miles an hour on the highway, and that Scott Bessent was the shock absorber there. But it seems as though there was an EU-U.S. call planned for today, and the president still made these threats. Mm-hmm. And it seemed as though, what is the strategy there? Was that before the meeting? Was it after the meeting? Either way, markets were unsettled there. I
want to come to you, David Jelly, with a question about this. What I find interesting is that, for me, watching Trump destroy the economy was just like watching Trump destroy the FBI, and just like watching Trump destroy DOJ, and just like watching Trump tap Hegseth to destroy the Pentagon in 2.0, and just like watching Trump tap Tulsi Gabbard to destroy the intelligence community. It was simply another arena where he was going to be chaotic and unsettling, to borrow Christine's word, and unpredictable. What about the fact that he is now indifferent to market swings is new and notable to you?
Look, I think there are weeks where we have to revisit the conversation that he is increasingly unstable and arguably unwell. The problem is he is able to wield executive power in areas of national and economic security. And Nicolle, if you were trying to destroy a nation from the outside, but much less from within, you would do a couple of things. You would first break our security alliances with the West, our long-held allies. You would empower our enemies. We have seen that in the first 100+ days. You would also disrupt our domestic economy. That is essentially what he is attacking at this point, to your point. And third, you would break the ability of the government to provide services to its people. That is complete disruption, not only of government, but of culture and of society. And Donald Trump seems to not care about the fallout from this. I think it raises hard questions, as always, for Republicans then. Look, Donald Trump won't be on the ballot again. The Republicans have failed to check him. They have elevated and celebrated him. But what happens when they go home over Memorial Day weekend and during a recess? I mean, you are looking at a president who is declaring economic warfare on our allies at the same time that the Congress is passing a bill to explode our debt and our deficits, and also cut delivery of healthcare services to seniors and those in need. So what type of positioning is this for today's Republican Party that they find defensible? I think we're seeing it in the numbers, and I think Republicans right now are terrified. But outside of the political question, we should all be terrified, because this is a president who has destabilized the world order in terms of our own national security interests, as well as our economic security. Look, at some point, we do have to revisit the conversation that this is a president who is unstable and increasingly unwell.
Well, to your point about the numbers, I mean, 66% of all Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's handling of inflation. That's 66% of Americans. 66% of Americans didn't vote for Kamala Harris. That's 66% of Americans who are available to vote for someone who is against Donald Trump's handling of inflation. 63% of all Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's tariff policy before, as Christine also pointed out, we're on a 90-day pause. They haven't even hit. So before they've even hit, 63% of all Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's tariff policy. There are 63% of Americans who are available to a politician who is against Donald Trump's approach to tariffs and inflation, David.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Nicolle. And look, given all of the controversy around the last year of the Biden administration, the one thing we know is they had largely brought, with the assistance of the Fed, of course, arguably the leadership of the Fed, Donald Trump inherited an economy that was relatively stable. Real wages were up, labor markets were tight, unemployment was down. The stock market was at an all-time high. We were at least seeing certainty, right? Inflation causes a certain amount of uncertainty, of course, but there was a certain stability in the economy that was allowing consumer confidence to reemerge. Donald Trump has just blown that up. And there, as we've talked often, we don't need to belabor it. There is no broader economic strategy here where he's going to spend 4 years pivoting us towards domesticating new industries. This is all done on a whim. And where it does inject uncertainty into the markets, we certainly see it day to day in the markets. It is injecting uncertainty into people's personal economies. And I think that's why you're seeing numbers in the 60s saying, wait a minute, I don't like this. It is because it is being felt in people's personal economies. The level of economic uncertainty now is so much higher than it was when Joe Biden handed off what was a stable economy to Donald Trump. Look, you broke it, you bought it, Republicans. This is your guy. You start explaining to the American people why he's right, but you can't do it, which is why you're losing special elections this cycle, and you're facing a generational change election next November where Democrats are going to be able to tell a very good story.